Who is your favorite Star Wars villain? Whoever wants to go first.
Count Dooku all day.
Kylo Ren, obviously. Sorry, everyone. I've never seen the, what are they called? Don't look at me like that. The three that are supposed to be before the other ones, but they're not. The middle ones?
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. I'm the worst.
Oof. We're going to go home and watch all the Star Wars movies tonight.
More embarrassing to you than me, I guess.
Yeah, Ruth, what about you?
I watched the first Star Wars movie that ever came out in the theater 5 times. That was in 1977, okay? I have to say Jabba the Hutt.
Wow, that's
My
so
favorite
good.
villain, yeah.
That's a good one.
600-pound life, right?
Yeah. I would say, for me, I really think Force Awakens, Kylo Ren, but Kylo Ren in the last two is a terrible villain. Hot take. Those are not great movies anyways. But I also really like Darth Maul because I grew up going to see those in theaters when I was a kid. And, like, Darth Maul is just... He's got 2 lightsabers and his face. He's got horns. He's got horns on his head. It's so cool. Anyways, there you go. There was that one. All right, next question. I always like to help my friends, but sometimes I end up getting caught in the middle of situations, sometimes pretty bad ones. I want to still help them, but I also don't want to get too involved. Do you have any advice for me?
Okay, I'll take this one. Don't try to fix your friends. There's sometimes advice can go the wrong way. You're better off posing everything as a question, like, do you think that's a good idea? Asking if they would like some prayer for it. But don't try and give advice. Usually advice doesn't go over really well. Help them to question themselves about their own decisions, and maybe they'll come to the right conclusion.
Yeah. I think a lot of the questions tonight, I'm going to say something about discernment. But so who is influencing who? And how are you being influenced? If you're not being the influencer and like the situations are truly dangerous, like I think it was worded that way. Or is that a different question?
Yeah, that's a different one we'll get to.
Okay. Well, who's being influenced and looking at your relationship with that in mind, because if you're being more influenced than your friends are, then you need to reevaluate.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I'd agree. Yeah, I think there's a level of help as much as you can, but yeah, you don't want to get too involved where all of a sudden you're now in that situation yourself. I think the other thing is bad company corrupts good morals, is what the Bible says. And sometimes you are implicated just by association. And so be careful of who you're associating with, and because you can be guilty by association as well. So great answers. Next one. Does God determine everything that happens, or do we have free will to determine what happens?
I feel like we have if you think about it, a great example I thought of a couple years ago, or someone told me, I can't remember. Anyways, if you put a baby on the table, right? The baby can go where it wants to go on the table, but it can come close to the edge, God's still going to pick it up and put it back on the table. So you still have free will, but it's in the boundaries of what God's direction is for your life.
Yeah, I think that is great. Yeah, this is a great example. That's 100%. I would agree with that. 100 emoji. Anyone else? Thoughts? All right. Next question. There you go.
Yeah, it's God's plans no matter what. He does all the planning. Either way, whether you choose his way or choose another way, he's still got it. He's still in the plans.
It's still working.
Yeah.
I do like telling, I said this to a Shine student a couple weeks ago, because Shine student asked this question, a sixth grader. And I was like, sixth grade, you're asking this question, wild. And I was like, the thing to remember is God is not a puppet master. We're not puppets, or we're not Sims, and God's playing some sort of cosmic sim game where all of our decisions are Him, clicking and moving us or whatever. But that we have the free will to make decisions, but God uses those and has a determined plan, and He's going to accomplish them no matter what we choose to do or not do. So, great. Next question. What is the best proof for God's existence?
Ooh, I love this question. I dove right in on this one. The universe is very fine-tuned, and there's certain things about it that have to be in order the way, you look at creation, and in order to sustain life here on earth, so many things are put in place. And it started out, I think, years ago they said there was like 12 things. And now it's like 18 things. And it keeps growing and growing. Those things have to be in exactly a certain order. It's not by chance. And if you get even one of those things a little bit out of order, life will cease. Now, what are the chances of having all of those things put in order if there wasn't a creator to do it?
Yes.
That's my thought.
I feel that. I have a hard time looking out into the universe at night and being like, yeah, this all just happened, yeah. But so on top of that, on top of your argument, I think the kalam, which we talk about a lot, but so first cause, because we're here right now, something had to have gotten us here. And then I don't want to steal your thunder because I know you wanted to talk about the moral argument, but in general, people agree, right, that murder, for example, is wrong, and that's biblical, right? But even people who aren't Christians usually would say, don't murder. And we don't have any other excuse for that or any other reasoning for that other than we were created with morals woven into us. And there's a reason behind that, and that would be God.
Yeah. I'm in my apologetics class in school right now, and literally yesterday I'm reading on Friedrich, I never know how to pronounce his last name, but Nietzsche, whatever. And he makes the argument, and he's an atheist, but he says, he's famously known for saying God is dead, and the Enlightenment. What he means is that the Enlightenment killed God, and thereby, because society no longer holds to itself to this theistic view or even Christian view, that morals just don't exist, is really what he said. And that was his argument as an atheist. And I go, hang on a minute, you are making a very good case for God existence by simply saying, well, because God doesn't exist, there's no objective morality. And it's yeah, but there is objective morality. We all would agree with that. Even though there are some cultures that did cannibalism, the vast majority of people since the beginning of time has said, yeah, cannibalism's wrong. We don't eat each other. But where did we get that from? How did that, it's not an evolutionary process that we came to. It is God has woven us, like Lakin said, God has woven us with morals. And you can't really explain that outside of some sort of standard bearer for morals. There has to be some sort of standard creator for the standards we live by as humans, not just as Christians.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I like the idea of, I love science. I love everything that has to do with science. And I love science because when you get to an unknown, you just say it's an unknown. You're not sure. You can throw theories out there, but it's everything about everything about science tells us that life can't start from nothing. Everything that shows for science. But life is here and we are here. So either something started it or it always existed, which either way proves God exists. So existence, that's not the right word, exists. So
I think a non sort of scientific or philosophical, maybe it's a little philosophical, is the C.S. Lewis's liar, lunatic, or Lord argument in Mere Christianity. He says you have to look at the teachings of Jesus and you have to come to one of three conclusions. Either he's a liar, he's a lunatic, he's a liar and that makes him the devil himself because he claimed to be God. He's a lunatic, he's crazy, or he's Lord. And you have to kind of come to one of those three conclusions. You can't just, he goes on to say, like, you can't just say Jesus was a great moral teacher, because that's not what he claimed to be. He never claimed to be a great moral teacher. He claimed to be God, and you've got to do something with that. And so that's a really great way, I think that's a really compelling way to view Jesus as God. And if Jesus said, God exists because I am also God, you've got to deal with that in one of three ways, and I think I think the correct answer is he's Lord as well. So, yeah.
Can I read a scripture in here?
Yeah.
Okay, Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse.
That's good. That's good.
Just wanted to add that in.
Next question. The Sermon on the Mount is traditionally considered to be Jesus' teaching to the masses, but I've heard some more recent theories claim that it's actually to the disciples that he speaks. Is there historical or biblical evidence to support either side? I'm going to do I don't know. I've always interpreted it as he's speaking to both. He obviously gets onto the mountain, but Matthew 5:1 says, when he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began teaching them, saying, and he goes through the teaching. But I don't know if there's a good theological, I don't think it changes anything related to what the Sermon on the Mount is saying, whether he's speaking to everybody or just to his 12 or a closer group of disciples, because he had about 100 actual disciples that walked with him and then the 12 that he was closest with. I don't know if it changes the implications of the Sermon on the Mount one way or the other. But it is fun to theorize, and but I haven't studied it deeply enough to give a good educated. Oh, good. Ruth's got something.
At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, in chapter 7, the very last verse in chapter 7, it's 7:28. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. So he spoke to the crowds, and they were amazed. So that was at the very end of that. So I don't think there's any dispute that he was speaking to everyone.
Great. Next one. Team Cap or Team Iron Man?
Listen, Iron Man was a great character, but he only really sacrificed once. Cap was always willing to sacrifice, and he always had, like, the morals. Listen, he was a goody two-shoes the whole time, but the moment he stood up against the mountain with a broken shield about to take on an army, knowing he's going to die, he had me. He won. That's all I want in life, you know? That's it.
I've never seen them, sorry.
You
I
guys
know,
are.
I need to start watching.
Yeah. if it's not an original Disney movie, I don't really want it. You probably wouldn't like my answer anyway, so I plead the fifth on this one.
Captain America. Captain America is the correct answer in that one. Yeah. Iron Man was wrong in Civil War, and the only thing I really like about Iron Man is he in the MCU is he mentors Spider-Man, who's the best MCU superhero. So, moving on. Well, why don't we as Protestants believe in transubstantiation? So let me explain what transubstantiation is, because it's a very fancy word. It is a Catholic doctrine related to the Lord's Supper, where Catholics would say that when you partake in the Lord's Supper, the priest consecrates it, and the bread and the wine physically turn into Jesus' body and Jesus' blood. There's also kind of tangentially related to transubstantiation is the Catholics would also say that taking of the Lord's Supper is conferring grace on you. And so by doing so, you are conferring grace onto yourself as well. So why don't we as Protestants believe in that?
Because Christ died, so grace is given freely, not upon an action, but a communication, relational thing that we have.
Yeah. When Jesus breaks the bread and, prior to his death, and he says, do this in remembrance of me. He says, do this in remembrance of me, as a way to acknowledge his sacrifice and for the disciples to align themselves as his bride. And that's his point for us too, is to do it in remembrance of his sacrifice and align ourselves with his family. In my opinion, it's kind of like a misdirection of the Trinity, which I mentioned the other day to you. So we don't need to consume physically Jesus, right? We have the Holy Spirit that comes upon us. That's the transforming part of our lives when we become believers, is the Holy Spirit, not necessarily the body or the blood physically.
I think that Christ shed his blood and his body one time, not multiple. One time, and that's all we needed.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to that is in every instance where Jesus, whether it's at the actual Last Supper or any time he makes reference to the breaking of his body or the cup that must spill, they're all metaphorical. And so I was trying to find it, and I can't find it, but I know that Catholics use one specific verse that really is what they hold on to as sort of the foundation of that doctrine. And if Jesus is speaking metaphorically in all of the other examples, I think he speaks it in all of them. And I think the other thing is I do believe Jesus is spiritually present when we take communion, but I don't believe he is physically present in that. So, great. Now you guys know a fancy new big word. You can use it at the dinner table. I don't know why I said that. How does one figure out what they want to do for a career when high school doesn't really handle any of the fields I'm interested in?
This is one of the things I struggled with my entire life. I feel like there's very few people on this planet that know exactly what they want to be and go off and do that. The rest of us, myself included, right now, have no idea what we're going to do, right? No idea. We're doing something because at the moment, that's where God placed us. And I tried out a bunch of different jobs, and they were all fun, and some were terrible. Not all fun. Some were terrible. But I think that if you have a passion towards something and you see, there's a lacking in something inside the world, and you just have, this passion, you feel God's desire towards it goes towards something, go towards it, right? And if you have hesitancy, like you like don't want to do it, and you're like, I don't want to do that. That's not quite like up my alley. But you feel like it's you pushing against it and not God pushing against it. Go try it. It's probably difficult for a reason, and it'll probably stretch you and grow you. And if it's God's will, man, it's gonna be so much fun. Well, it's gonna be a lot of work, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, I think if it's something related where you need to go to college for, don't be stressed out about changing your degree. 85% of people who go to college change their degree at some point. I changed my degree at some point. So don't stress at 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, whatever age you are, over what you're going to do for the rest of your life. You will probably change careers at some point in your life as well. Not very, like Nathan said, very rarely do people know what they want to do and do it for their whole life. And so try things out. Have fun with it.
Yeah. And don't be ashamed that you don't know what to do either, because, like, we don't know what we want to do. And, yeah, I'm in the same boat as Nathan pretty much. I'm just doing what, seems right at the time, and that's okay. So there's no shame in that. It's something I've had to wrestle with, like.
I've been told, what's in your hand right now?
And luckily, we're in the age of computers and technology. So if you are doing something, or you want to do something that your school doesn't recognize, like cartoon drawing or whatever else you want to do, or voice acting, there's a million avenues to do stuff online. And college courses, you could take a non-accredited, not great college course for very cheap, and you can try it out in high school. See what you guys like, get a part-time job, try out that college course, and just go for it. Because it doesn't really matter. You can just try that stuff now, which we're very, very, very lucky.
Yeah. Did this just turn into a Skillshare ad?
Yes.
The Great Courses Plus. Do that. That's great. How should you handle stress buildup from classmates making you expect so much from yourself?
Are you sure it's not you that's putting stress on yourself?
I know it is for me.
Ooh, that's deep.
Just a thought.
I don't know if I'm an Enneagram 3, and so I'm the type of person that would just want to please everybody and want everybody to like me, so I would create that stress on myself. So maybe that makes me the best person to talk to about this. I don't know. Check if it's stress that they're putting on you or you're putting on yourself, or also just talk to your classmates. They might not even know that they're creating undue stress on you. If they're friends with you, they should understand and not put so much stress on you. If they're not your friends and they're putting stress and it's a group project, this is terrible advice, but I'm going to say it because I think it's funny. If it's a group project and everyone's putting stress on you to do the group project, just don't do it and let everybody fail. And they've learned their lesson to not put their hope in one person, except for Jesus. They put their hope in Jesus. That's my funny answer. There you go. All right. Next question. What's Jeremy's favorite coffee roast? And do I like cold brew or hot coffee? Lakin, do you want to answer this?
First of all, yes, he likes cold brew or hot. And Ethiopian Yirgacheffe pour over is his favorite thing to get at home. Make at home, sorry.
Yeah. So I like light or medium roast, coffee that is very acidic, that's got fruity and floral notes. Ethiopian Yirgacheffe's my favorite, but I also like Ethiopian Harar, Ethiopia Goji, Mexican Chiapas is really good as well. I could talk for hours about coffee. I love it. It's so good. Dark roasts are disgusting. They taste like dirt. That is my...
Yeah, Tim's, Dunkin', or Starbucks.
I mean, if I'm getting straight coffee from them, zero. But if I had to choose, I would have to probably say Dunkin', for the reason of Tim Hortons is very watered down, it tastes like, and Starbucks is they over roast all of their coffee. Even their light and medium roasts are basically dark roasts, and it's gross. From what? Typically like a cold foam cold brew. If I'm gonna go.
Do you like spot coffee?
I do like spot coffee. So yeah,
I'm a spot coffee fan.
Yeah.
great. I love it. I
Great.
do love it. All right, we are jumping into I'm jumping ahead to a different question because I wanted to answer it and made sure that we had time for it. So here we go. What can Movi do to protect its students from abuse, considering the growing accusations within the Church of Western New York? Really like that question. So I wanted to answer that directly to you guys. So you heard it from me first. And here's what I'm going to say. This place, Movi, should be one of the safest places for you to come to. This should be a space where you feel open, or should be able to be open, to be vulnerable, to be transparent with your leaders, with me, with Dana, with one another. And that's, I would say on behalf of all of the leaders here, that is the hope, is that this is a safe place for you. But this is also a place where we want you to have a voice, feel like you have a voice, but also to be heard with that voice. And so we have created, very recently, we've done an overhaul of our policies and procedures for the very reason of we want the most protection we can have for this to be a safe space for you. And it breaks my heart to hear of different abuses that happen in this region and just in the church in general. I know there's now a new documentary about Hillsong on Discovery Plus. I don't know anybody that subscribes to Discovery Plus, but it's on Discovery Plus about Hillsong, this massive church, right? It breaks my heart to hear about that, and I don't want that to be the case here. And so I want to say this. If you have ever experienced abuse, whether that's here or at home or at school or wherever, know that you have a voice and you've got an advocate and someone that will believe you in me, Dana as well, and I'm sure all of any of these leaders. And so we have done our best and will continue to do the most we can to protect you and help you grow in your faith, but also to help protect you from these things. And so I hope you feel that way. If you don't, please come talk to me because I want to know how we can do better if you don't feel that way. So, yeah, there you go. Next question. Hard transition. What is your favorite Christian song and why? Favorite Christian song and why?
Mine's Heaven's Knife by Josh Garrels. Talks about just the beauty of marriage and talks about his wife, and it's a song I danced to on our wedding day, and it holds a special time, a special thing in my heart. Yeah.
Aww.
No.
For a split second, I thought he was about to. I was like, I'm really sad we're not recording this right now. For me, I would say I Have This Hope by 10th Avenue North. It's a very personal song for me. It was when my mom passed away 4.5 years ago. She was unknowingly dying in a hospital room while we were at Kingdom Bound. And 10th Avenue North's concert, all I remember is sitting in my little camping chair or whatever, watching the concert, and I had sunglasses on because I was bawling because my mom was sick, and I didn't know she was dying, but I had this really bad feeling in the pit of my soul that things were not getting better. And they played that song, and that song kind of became a rallying song for our family during that time. And every time I hear that song, it just is a reminder to me that despite everything going on, the troubles, the tribulations, the trials we'll walk through, we've got to hope in Jesus. And so that will probably forever be my favorite Christian song. So
That one's pretty important to me too, for the same reasons. I don't have my phone to look up who sings this. I'm really bad at these kind of questions. But one of my favorite songs right now is Truth Be Told. Does anybody know who sings that? Matthew West, yeah. So it's a good one. It resonates with me a lot and helps me put things into perspective that, we're not all okay and we're all broken, and that's okay. That's the point. So
Mine is It Is Well by Christine DeMarco. It's also an old hymn that has been redone, and has a really great backstory to the whole hymn of how it was written. And one of the lines is, "It through it all, my eyes are on you." And it that song brought me through my struggles with cancer and illness and grief, everything. It's a beautiful song.
next question. There is this boy I like, and he likes me, but I want to back up because my parents don't allow me to date. He wants to wait for me, but I would rather for him to move on. He's very much against moving on, so what should I do?
what should you do? First of all, you back way up, and this one needs like a lot of context for it. So we go back first and we get some context. Like, is he a believer? What type of person is he? Does he bring out the good things in you? Does he encourage you? Do you actually like him? Because we didn't really address that. We're not stringing people along here. Sorry. And I think if you actually don't like him, even if he is all of those things, like he's a believer and he brings out good things in you, blah, 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 then you're honest and you say, I don't like you that way, and tell him, what your expectation is. And if you do actually like him, let him pursue you, I guess, but don't have too many expectations on anything, and just focus on being friends first.
Agreed. Plus 2% of high schoolers last into long-term relationship. 2%. It's really low.
I just want to say kudos for not going behind your parents' back and dating and honoring their decision
Yes.
to not allow you to date. I think that's smart, and that shows maturity. Be friends. Chances are one of you will stop having feelings for the other one at some point, and now you're just friends, and you don't have the strings attached. But if somebody likes you and they don't want to stop liking you, you can't control their feelings. Sorry. But yeah, what they said was great.
Yeah, listen to your parents. You're in their household. That's biblical amongst many other things. And if they can still be your friend without making things uncomfortable or trying to pursue you, that's fantastic. There's other people inside here, myself included, that wasn't in the right season to pursue someone, and God told me to wait, and I did. And I know there's other people, like co-leaders in this room, that God's just this is not the season that you get to date. That means you should wait and pursue them as a friend, as a human being. And if you guys can continue doing that, then sure, stay friends and stay in contact. But if they can't do that, then maybe you make some space between you and them.
That's good. Somewhat related, next question says, can you kiss before marriage?
I heard you have a crush on me.
Well, I'm going to throw Lakin under the bus because we talked about some of the questions. Yes, you can physically kiss someone before you are married. You are physically capable of doing so. It is a question of whether, there's nothing against it in the Bible, but also use your judgment. If you feel like that is a thing that you want to that will lead you to further further lust, or if you're like, this is just, like, that is a boundary for you, like, be unashamed of that, right? Like, there are people who had their first kiss at their wedding day, and that's okay. So if you're asking if is it biblically permissible to kiss before marriage, like, yeah. There's nothing that says you can't in the Bible. But yeah, if that's a standard that you want to hold to it.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Cool. Next question. How do you win the battle over lust?
By stop viewing people as anything more than people, brothers and sisters in Christ and everything else. If you're looking at someone in a sexual way, regardless of their gender and everything else attached to that, if you're looking at them any more than a soul that's eternal, that's going to last forever, then you're never going to be able to beat lust. It's just never going to happen, because you're always going to view them as something to get enjoyment off of, instead of someone to care about and embrace. Not embrace, but you know what I mean.
I think wording it as a battle is definitely like the proper wording, because so much of lust is a mental thing. Like, obviously it can be a physical thing too, but I think the answer to this is accountability, no matter what. So whether it's, personal accountability, you need to tell your small group leader, I'm looking at people like this, like Nathan mentioned, I'm looking at girls like for their bodies and stuff, and I need someone to hold me accountable. Then you find someone who's going to touch base with you and say, how's that going? What have you been thinking about recently? Like, how do we curb this? And then I think, especially in a relationship, this battle, you need to set a boundary before you even call it a relationship, and decide what that boundary is together. If it's kissing, you're not going to kiss, then set that boundary, and you need to have outside accountability on both sides of the relationship that know that that is your boundary, and they're going to ask you and make sure that you're following that boundary. How's your boundary? How's that boundary going? And that's the only way that, you're going to have real success, because a lot of the time that stuff can just be swept under the rug because nobody has to know, but you need to make people know.
I wrote down in my notes, change your habits. If you're looking at things that you shouldn't be looking at, change your habit. Get rid of it. James 1:21 says, therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. I'm gonna also say I don't know if you can fully win the battle over any sin or temptation this side of eternity. You can do a really good job of tempering it, but there are things that we will battle within ourselves, sinful things within ourselves, until we're glorified with Christ, and that's just the nature. The hope is, though, as we grow more and more like Jesus, that those battles become a lot easier. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can ever fully win it until we're with Jesus. So, yeah. Next question. If we're all supposed to bring people to Christ, what if they're not good for you and aren't good to be around? Should you still be around them even if they're dangerous?
Okay, what was the memory verse for this last series? The 1 Corinthians 15:33. Anybody know it? You see anybody? No? Nobody remember that one from the Roots? Bad company corrupts morals? Right?
Yeah, I was waiting to see if any of them knew it. Yeah. If they're dangerous, don't.
Just get rid of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're dangerous. They're not. No. You don't need to. You don't need to be the savior of someone and try and save them if they're dangerous. If there's the potential for harm, get out of any sort of friendship. And I think it's also good to remember we may just plant the seed and someone else is going to water. Paul talks about that, right? And so you might just need to plant the seed and then leave. Because like we previously talked about, like you can be guilty by association or influenced by those things. And so, yeah, I think be cautious. Yes, you want to have non-Christian friends. Please don't just have your little Christian bubble. But be wise in just the way you interact.
Yeah, I mean, we're all in seasons, right? So, like, when I was in high school, right, I could not, like, I'm not be able to go to, like, a party or, like, a bar and, like, not be, like, tempted or, like, worried what's going on. Now I can because I'm just in a different season. So if you find yourself where you don't feel safe, regardless of where it is, stop going to that place, right? Until you feel like you're strong enough or you feel like God's leading you towards that place, don't keep doing that thing. But God will eventually lead you into a place that you feel uncomfortable. That's real, but He's given you the strength to overcome those things.
What are future event ideas for Movi? Yeah, I mean, you got senior night coming up in June. We've got a new series coming up in 2 weeks. No, we're thinking about doing some fun stuff over the summer, a little bit. Maybe another kickball tournament or something. But you're just gonna have to wait to find those things out. So, my lips are sealed. How can I don't know why I paused there. I was like, anyone else wanna? I don't know. How can you put all your faith into Jesus when you pushed away those who introduced you to Him and helped you grow with Him?
I don't know, friendships are sometimes a season. You'll have friends and then you'll move on and make new friends, and that's kind of just the way it is.
Yeah. If you're putting all your faith into Jesus, you don't need to put your faith into your friends anymore.
Same as your parents brought you to life and they introduced you to oxygen outside of themselves. Just because your parents aren't around doesn't mean you can't still keep breathing, you know? That's what faith is.
I love it.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great. Next question. Why do certain Christians condone hate against other people?
Because they haven't found love yet.
Mm-hmm. They don't know any better.
No. They're the same as the world. They just happen to call themselves Christian.
Yeah, that was gonna be my hot take answer. Is if you're claiming the name of Christ but condoning hate against other people, I wouldn't call you a brother or sister. I don't think you truly know Christ.
Somewhere in the Bible it says that we're blind. When we hate other people, that we're blinded. So, I don't know where that was.
Yeah. I know growing up was really prevalent when I was in high school. The Westboro Baptist Church, I don't know if you guys know who they are. They would picket funerals and things with horrific signs that I don't even want to say. But like, I had to repeatedly tell people, that is not a church that is a Christian church. That is, those people, no, they are, Jesus would be flipping tables over them, for sure, for sure. Next question. Sometimes my friend tells me that they are going to cry or that they're just in so much pain that they can't take it anymore. How should I respond?
That's one of the times where maybe it's not as much about your response as it is about how you're listening. So most of the time when people are hurting, that's what they need. They don't need an answer or for you to solve their problem. They need to talk and process. And sometimes, based on what they tell you, you might have to take action. It might feel like you're throwing your friend under the bus, but in the end, you're probably saving their life, right?
Yeah, take love in action. Take and ask that friend, can I help you call someone? Actually dial the phone for them if you have to. But, call a suicide hotline. Call a small group leader. Call a counselor at school. Walk them to the counselor. Tell them you'll go to counseling with them. It's love in action. Yeah.
Just consistently, if you actually do care about the person, show up.
Yeah.
For the next forever, really. I mean, if you actually care about this person and they're hurting, just be in their life. If you say that there's someone that means something to you, then just show up.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. There is evidence to suggest that many of the disciples were in their mid to late teens. They didn't have kids. Many of them were unmarried. They were still learning trades from their parents. Is there anything against or for this theory?
I'd like to know where they're getting their information. Because, they said Peter was married. Jesus came and healed his mother-in-law. And he could have been widowed too, but it doesn't say that in the text.
Correct, and they go to Peter's house. So
Yeah.
Peter is the only one that we know of that has his own house. I would say all of the things that whoever asked this question listed are 100% for those theories. The only two people that we can assume are slightly older are Peter, because he was married and probably had kids, and maybe Matthew, because he was a tax collector, which probably he was a little older. You can also look at just in terms of the Jewish normal custom of rabbis and their students. It was typically around late 15 to 20 was when rabbis would take on students. Jesus and his apostles were Jewish and followed that custom. The other thing I would add to that is John. John wrote Revelation, and if you date it to how most people date it, to somewhere in 90 AD, and Jesus dying somewhere 30 to 34 AD, that's 60-year difference. John's got to be pretty young when Jesus dies for him to write Revelation in 90 AD, for 60 years later. So I think all of those 100% would lean to them being young. And I think that's even more staggering considering what they all do in Acts and dying for their faith, probably at that point, probably somewhere in their 20s or maybe early 30s. These are men with much of their life ahead of them, and they are willing to die for the name of Jesus. I think that's so compelling.
Just the fact that Jesus chose them.
Yeah.
They had to have had some kind of mature spirit in them that God saw that in him. Yeah, he knew who he was going to choose.
Why is Esther an important figure in the Bible? It's a great question.
Mm-hmm. She was just so full of courage. And I don't know how to put it. She trusted in God enough I know God is not mentioned in the book of Esther at all, but she asked Mordecai, her cousin, to ask the Jewish people to pray, or not to pray to fast. But what goes along with Jewish fasting? Prayer. So they were going to be praying and fasting for 3 days before she went to King Xerxes and, is it Xerxes? No, yeah, Xerxes. King Xerxes, and present her request. So she had strong faith, but she was also afraid. She was also afraid to go. And by asking her people to pray for her, it gave her courage, and I'm sure the prayers gave her courage and kind of softened maybe the king's heart a little bit too, to be open and receptive to her coming to him when she wasn't called to come. And I think that speaks into our lives. We can ask people to pray for us. Yeah, power of prayer.
Yeah, I know that the story of Esther is attributed to a Jewish festival as well. So the celebration of what happens in Esther is important for the Jewish people. I also think it's just a beautiful example of even when you don't see God explicitly, God is working in the details.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great reminder of that. Yeah.
I was going to say that too. I think her story shows that we all have power, and how we use it is important, because she kind of ended up where she was and basically, changed the trajectory of the population of the Jewish people. But like you said, Jer, it's a good example of the big picture plans God has. So for example, if she was never orphaned, she probably would have never become the queen and stopped this major Holocaust and all of these other things. So as much as that first step of her parents dying, seemed like this horrible, awful thing, I think we can look at the story and say these horrible, awful things that are happening in my life right now probably have this domino effect to the bigger picture of God's plan and is changing the trajectory of, infinite things.
Also, King's name, I just want to mention this because I think this is one of the coolest names in the Bible, is King Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus. It's a great name. It's a really, really cool name.
Name your next child, Aha.
Maybe. I doubt it. I very much doubt it. Why did the Bible talk about stoning people if Jesus didn't approve of it?
Throw one out there? Okay.
Yeah.
It was the standard form of punishment of the day. And, God sent his son into the world, not to condemn the world, but to save it.
Yeah, I think the Bible talks about a lot of things that Jesus doesn't approve of. But even if we look at the Old Testament law, like Ruth said, it was the form of punishment of the day. But I think the story of the woman caught in adultery is just a beautiful example of Jesus just removing that standard out from there. And yeah, I think. Yeah, that's my answer. All right. Why does God allow/make people gay? All right, I guess I will answer this one. Yeah, so I think this is, obviously this is a really difficult question. It is full of, I think the question itself is kind of got some presupposition in it, but I also think it's a delicate topic because we are talking about a very delicate subject. And so I want to hopefully answer this as delicately as I can. But I also know how I interpret some of this is different than how others. Some will land a little bit, do I want harder or softer on the issue than I will. I tend to think I have a very middle ground on it. and hopefully it will be seen that way. So I do not believe that God's intended design is for people to have same-sex attraction. Therefore, I don't think God makes people gay. However, I do believe same-sex attraction is a result of the fall of Adam and Eve, as is a lot of other things. The list is very long of things that came into the world as a result of Adam and Eve. Just like I can be born with a what's the word I'm trying to think? What did someone say? Disposition towards addiction. Whether that's gambling, whether that's sexual addiction, whether that's like alcohol or drug addiction, there's sort of a natural bent towards that. I believe that people can be born and are born with a natural bent towards same-sex attraction. So when someone who does identify as gay says, I was born that way, I think that is in some ways true, because we are all born into sin. However, that is not God's intended design for us. The second question of why does God allow it, I don't know. That is part of the big mystery of God's sovereignty. Why does God do a lot of things and allow a lot of things? I don't know. But as we talked about with the moral argument, God has set a standard of morality. And that is part of that. Now, I will add as well that I do not believe that simply having same-sex attraction prohibits you from being a follower of Jesus. Biblically, what I see is anytime it condemns it, it is condemning an action. Just like any sort of sexual action outside of marriage, it condemns. And so I would say, as I have a friend who wrote a book, his name's Greg Coles. I went to college with him. He wrote a book called Single Gay Christian, who said, listen, I am same-sex attracted, but my commitment to Jesus is higher than any sort of physical attraction I have. And so he has made the decision to live a celibate lifestyle in following Jesus' commands. And I believe that is biblically, I think that's following biblically, and it is beautiful. That takes a lot of faith and a lot of love for Jesus to say no to something that feels very natural. So I hope that answered the question in a...
And that's the answer to any weakness.
Correct.
You could be weak and be a liar. We all have our own weakness that we are born with. And you have to put your faith in Jesus and just work that out. If you're putting your faith in him, it actually becomes easier for you to recognize when you're being tempted and to avoid that temptation. But it takes time. It takes time.
So we've got 5 questions left. I say we just finish them because we've only got 5 left. It's 8:20. We're going to keep going and finish up these questions because I think this is really good. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Next one. What is the best way to handle a situation where someone says they are a Christian but don't act like it?
So what's your relationship to them is the first question, because if you met Johnny McGee on the street and he was like, I'm a Christian, and you're like, who are you? But he's like, I don't know, curb stomping somebody over there, you'd be like, okay, I'm getting away from you. I'm sorry. But if it's like your best friend and you are trying to lead each other in the way of Jesus and need to hold each other accountable, then I think the questions that Ruth posed earlier, like, do you think that's a good decision and
Yep.
stuff, are
Question mark.
good ways to approach it?
I think we've all got examples where if we claim the name of Jesus, but sometimes we don't act like it. And that's just where grace comes in, and that's where sanctification and growing into Christ likeness. But yeah, I think if you've got a relationship with him, you have the ability and the relationship and actually the biblical command to call a brother or sister out if you need to, for sure. Next question. What do you think is the most important story of the Bible and why? I so badly wanted to answer in 2 Kings with the she-bears, but that's not how I'm going to answer, but someone else can go.
Mine's the resurrection story, hands down.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole story of the Bible. That's what it comes down to this. The reason you're reading it is the prophecies beforehand, the actions of the resurrection, and then the ending is when he's coming back and we're going, he's coming or we're going, and we're meeting in the middle somewhere, yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah, I think my Jesus juke answer is I think there's only one story in the Bible. And it's the story of God's redemption of humanity through Jesus. And everything points to that. And that is the greatest story. And when you start to see Jesus in all of Scripture, especially in the Old Testament, it's a lot of fun. It's really cool. And you begin to see things that you haven't seen before, and you begin to see how God wove everything according to plan in Jesus. It's really, really cool. So, next question. Why did the Bible talk about slaves listening to their masters?
Because it was a circumstance that was happening at that time. And in order to be a good Christian, be an example of who Christ was, whether we are living in a government that controls everything that we do, or it's micromanaged like slavery at that time, that was something that was happening, if you show God to somebody, regardless, that has an opportunity of changing. And there's many stories in the Bible of a slave helping and changing a master's thought process because they were acting like Christ.
Now I look at it as like a boss-worker relationship. If we were to translate it into modern times, it's like how does a slave treat, or how does an employee treat their employer, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the slavery that occurred in the Bible was not what we often think of, which is like chattel slavery in like the South and the Civil War and all of that. It was a different kind of slavery. You can read about it, I believe, in Leviticus. If you really want to have some fun and read Leviticus. Every 7 years, slaves got to go free. The year of Jubilee, they got to go. And so it was not, they weren't indebted in slavery forever, like in many ways. And also, most of the time, masters treated their slaves much better than what we normally think of in slavery.
Also, welfare didn't exist. So this was also a form of helping people out, giving them a leg up. You had 7 years to get their stuff together and make a life. And then after the 7 years, if they didn't want to leave, they didn't have to.
Yep. Like indentured servitude. That was very, very common then. And that's what they would call slaves and masters. So, yeah, great. 2 more questions. Here we go. How can God be moving in a church or ministry when things like sexual abuse are happening underneath the surface? Why does he allow that? Well, I'll answer the second question just like I answered a couple questions ago. Unfortunately, I don't know. We don't know why God allows everything. But here's what I can say. I like to think of the church, if we want to use big C church, right? We think the global church, kind of like a high-rise building. And God has, from the beginning of Acts chapter 2, he has built his church with imperfect people. And those imperfections can become really obvious when you compound them. And so the church has a lot of cracks. The church has a lot of broken windows. The church has ceiling tiles missing. The roof leaks sometimes in the church. But what we've seen from the beginning of the church, God has sometimes redeemed what's broken. Sometimes he has reformed what's broken. And sometimes God has just demolished parts of his church because of how broken it is. I think of the story of Ananias and Sapphira in Acts. They sold all of their land to give to the church, but they kept some of the money to themselves, and they lied to the apostles. And if you don't know the story, the Holy Spirit knocks them both dead right then and there. I think that's the first example of God demolishing something in his church. Do not put your faith in the broken building. Put your faith in the foundation that the building's built on. Because the foundation is perfect. There is nothing wrong with the foundation of the church. And there is coming a day when the foundation will make the entire building perfect. Not because of anything the church does, but because of what the foundation's going to do. And so God moves in ministries that are broken. He has always done that, and sometimes he will destroy pieces that are broken. But he is still moving, and he still does incredible things, oftentimes through that brokenness. And I think that's important to remember. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that.
I just feel like we haven't talked enough about the enemy. Like, if you believe in the Bible, then you know the truth that we have a very real enemy as well, who, why would he not be here attacking the church? Why would he not be using, the broken parts of people to try to infiltrate the church and break, the big C church up? And I mean, he divides us, obviously, unfortunately, about political things and everything else. So the devil's going to use it, unfortunately, just like he uses a lot of things.
Yeah. Final question. How would you recommend sharing Movi and our relationship with Jesus with our friends who don't go to church in a way that isn't awkward or pushy?
I feel like the same way you invite them to, if you're playing a game on Saturday, or if you want to play video games or play sports or whatever else you want to do, if you're uncomfortable and awkward about doing something, it's going to feel uncomfortable and awkward to do those things. But if you're just living life and talking about life and someone's like, so what are you doing tonight? Like, going to Movi. You guys want to come? Like, as simple as something like that, that can make a big difference. But if you're uncomfortable about it because it's something that's real for you, because if you go to invite them to something that you genuinely care about and they turn it down, it's hurtful to you. But that should just show you how much more you should probably start inviting them. If it means that much to you, that can mean that much to them as well.
Yeah. I think it starts with living authentically. If you're giving and helping and listening to others, regardless of who they are, they're going to listen to the fact that, you're coming to Movi and the things that are going on in your life. And sometimes it's awkward, and I think it's just because sometimes we're awkward people, and it's okay to be comfortable with that too. But like Nathan said, like, if you're living authentically, it's going to authentically come. And like we talked about earlier too, planting the seeds, like, in the end, your job is to live authentically and obediently, and obviously do your best to tell people and invite them here, because you don't have to have a perfect story to tell. And that's why, ministries exist, but you're not the savior and you're not accountable to save people, and sometimes just planting those seeds is what people need and is what God's plan is for them at first.
Yeah. And ask questions. Find out where they're at. And, maybe, you'd say, do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in hell? And then go from there. Find out where they're at.
Yeah.
Opens up a conversation if you find out where they're at.
Yeah, I think it's silly, but that's why we have and create certain events, is to make it less awkward or pushy to invite people. That's why we've done one nights this year, and that's why we have the lock-in and things sometimes during the summer and different opportunities like that, because it makes it so much easier if it's not, hey, come to my church and we're going to worship and hear a message and have, but if it's, hey, you really like French fries and dancing, we're eating French fries and dancing on Wednesday at my youth group, come on. And that's going to, that's a little more, that's easier to invite someone to. Or say, hey, you hate sleep, why don't you come to the lock-in, right? It's those things, those are the ways that we try to help, but I think Lakin's absolutely right. It's living authentically. Someone said it, and I don't know who it was, some smart person, that many times you are the only Bible that people will read. And so live as, in many ways, people shouldn't have to guess if you're a Christian. They should know about your relationship with Jesus just in the way you act. And it shouldn't be super awkward, because if you go up and be like, hey, can I talk to you about Jesus? They shouldn't be like, whoa, Jesus? Where did that come from? And they're like, oh, no, this person is all about Jesus, right? Yeah, I think just live authentically, and that's why we've got fun things, but don't just invite them to those fun things. You invite them to any other Wednesday. Yeah. So that's it for questions. So I guess I want to ask you guys, we talked about it backstage. We've got a little bit of time if we want to see if anyone's brave and wants to ask live. So we've got a couple of minutes, so we can dismiss for a very short community group, or open up the floor if anyone's got questions that they want to put us on the spot with.
Can't see anything.
I don't know if any, do we got one?
Michael?
All right. We don't have another microphone. It's just our microphones. So project.
Can you give an example?
It doesn't. Yeah. I don't think they contradict themselves.
I have an answer to that, okay? You have 4 accounts for, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, about the death on the cross, okay? If you were to see a car accident with 3 of your friends, you would all describe it differently. Yes. Yeah, each one of us has a different perspective when looking at something. We're not all going to say the same thing. In fact, I think it shows that there's more truth in the story because it wasn't cookie cutter. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
I also think the gospel writers all had different audiences and different purposes for writing their gospels. Matthew is writing to a primarily Jewish audience, so he's going to focus a lot on Jewish things, fulfillment of Old Testament. Luke's writing a very orderly account for someone who is probably a Gentile believer. Mark is trying to write a very quick gospel and try and get kind of the main points. And then John's very different from the other 3, and he is very much trying to show Jesus' divinity in his gospel. And so they're gonna have, like Ruth said, different focuses, and so it doesn't contradict.
Or different styles of writing.
Yeah.
Like every writer isn't the same.
Yeah. So. All right, Elliot, project.
What is your favorite brand of French
Favorite brand of French fry? Who wants to go?
Brand.
Brand. Are you asking like what type of fry or like actual brand?
Where you go?
Are we talking like fast food? Okay, fast food French fry. Favorite place?
Arby's.
I'm gonna. Arby's is good, but I think I really like Checkers fries. Have you ever had Checkers fries? They're good.
I say Arby's fries. You get that nacho cheese and you dip that in there, and it changes things.
I'll say any place that has fresh cut. I like
Ooh,
fresh
real
cut fries for sure.
That's good. That's good.
Five Guys, yes.
Oh, I forgot about the Cajun
Yeah.
fries. Come on.
Those are the best.
Yeah.
Genesis, right? I say Genesis.
I would probably say Genesis, but I would say probably, yeah, I don't know if I'd go sequentially through it fully, because you're going to get about halfway through Exodus and they start talking about the tabernacle and you're just like, well, this was bad choices were made, right? Like especially like it's dry. It's not bad, it's just dry. I think Genesis is a great place to start, and then I would maybe say jumping into other narrative stuff. So 1st, 2nd Samuel, maybe Psalms. I would avoid, if you're unfamiliar with a lot of the Old Testament, I don't know if I would start with Ezekiel, because Ezekiel's a little crazy. But yeah, I wouldn't start with that. All right, I saw a hand over here. I want to say no, but I'm trying to find the biblical reason why I'm saying no, because I know there is one.
That's a very good question. All the questions were great tonight, guys, by the way. They were really good. Okay.
Either of you want to answer that?
No.
Did Adam and Eve go to hell? Let me see here.
Oh.
Yes.
Go for it. Shh. Quiet.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if they were in Hebrews 11, but what we read in Hebrews is that those in the Old Testament that believed in the promise of the coming Messiah were saved, right? Like Abraham is saved not because he knew who Jesus was, he believed in the promise, and I think Adam and Eve believed in the promise of the one to come. So I believe we can all have a great look. We can see them in heaven and go,
There's more.
thanks.
Loads more.
Okay, we've got a lot.
Asher, Aaron.
Asher, go ahead. In the sense, I believe, I'll say yes, but I want to clarify on 2 points. The action itself, yes. The attraction has I would say, sinful intent. In the same way of sinful intent of me wanting to do some sort of lustful act with anyone outside of my wife is also, there's sinful intent there. But I believe you can be same-sex attracted, celibate, and faithful to Jesus in that. Seth.
If there was a book in the Bible you could get rid of, what would it be? And if you could create a book in the Bible, what would you put in?
Revelations talks about not adding or taking away from.
It does. It does.
I would like to not be a heretic tonight, so I'm gonna
Okay.
not
we
answer
still
that
have
one.
Lots more on the right hand
Down
side
here in
over
front.
here, so.
Did Adam and Eve have belly buttons? No, they did not. They had no need for one.
All right.
Yeah, they didn't have need for one. If you don't know why you need a belly button, go ask your parents. Go talk to your parents about why you have a belly button. All right.
Aaron's had your hand up for a while. Go.
I've gotten the question a lot of where do dinosaurs fall into place within like Genesis, and if those 7 days were longer in a sense of time in comparison to our days now.
Well, the days that we have, like in Genesis, if you go back to the original scripts like that, they're described as period of time and not necessarily days. So because of that, we don't really know how old things are, where they fall. So it could be way longer or way shorter. So I have no idea.
Yeah, the Hebrew word that in Genesis 1 is yom, which translates day, but in other places in the Old Testament it translates as era or period. And so there's lots of different theories on it. I would personally hold that yom is this indescriptive word, and so I also think, as we know, God is outside of time, and so a day on earth is a blip. For a year on earth is a blip for him, and so I think you don't have to hold to a literal 24-hour, 6-day creation. I think there is room to agree to disagree. I think the biggest piece of it is God created it. Did you also ask about dinosaurs? Yeah,
Job talks about dinosaurs.
Yes.
You know, it talks
Yeah.
about the behemoth that's
Yep.
head eats off the top of cedars, right?
The
And
Leviathan.
the Leviathan that
Yeah.
boils the seas and has like scales the size of armor, right? It's a giant serpent, and they joked about like you couldn't use an anchor for a ship to hoist up the Leviathan, right? So like they're very aware of these creatures' existence, whether or not they exist at the same time or are stories of old. I mean, for them to know about their at least existence, there had to have been some sort of closeness.
Yeah, the word dinosaur is new. Really, it's not something that's ancient. Where Leviathan and Behemoth are ancient words. Okay. Go.
one in the back there. Yeah. So the question was, sorry, I'm trying to reword it because I can't remember the beginning part. You said, if I was not born, is that what you said? Mm. It's a hard question. think I would look at what Paul says, where he says, he actually encourages people to not be married. And I can't remember, I'm losing what book of the Bible it's in, but he actually encourages people to be celibate like him for the sake of the gospel. And he says, unless you have like uncontrollable lust, get married, but otherwise, it is better for you not to marry. And I think I have a lot of friends who are opposite sex attracted, who can't find love. But God uses them in more incredible ways than he can use me in some ways. And I think, listen, like if I had to choose between my wife who's sitting right next to me and Jesus, if that was an ultimatum of follow Jesus or stay with your wife, and one without the other, if you stay with your wife, you're no longer loving Jesus. Sorry, honey, I'm choosing Jesus. Jesus is the option. There's no other relationship I need. And so that is a hard, and I don't want you to hear me as being that is hard, and I don't fully know. That is the challenge of so many questions with faith and with God, and it's hard to answer because you're dealing with real people with real emotions. That's probably the best answer I can have off the cuff. No, we got one over here. Did Gideon ask for so many signs because he wanted to be sure, or what was the last part? Okay, so sort of like, was he testing God, or was he just trying to like confirm, right? Is that the question? Let me jump to Judges really quick, because I do think it tells us a little bit about Gideon. Sorry, if somebody else wants to answer, feel free. I always took it that Gideon was very timid and was very unsure of himself, and he wanted, I think he was trying to find ways to avoid what God was calling him to. Yeah, that is kind of how I've always read that story. We almost used Gideon in our new series coming up to talk about some flaws, but we didn't. So that's kind of how I saw him. It was sort of a mix of both testing and uncertainty. Any other questions?
There's one over here.
Is Santa real?
Yes, Saint Nicholas is a real person who really lived. Okay, you have a legit question. That was a very legit question, though.
Okay, so if God is omnipotent and out of time, then, and I know we have free will, but doesn't he already know everything that's going to happen exactly? Like, how can we go off, differ from that threat? If that makes sense. Like, if he's out of time.
So like the same thing that we were talking about before with like, if you're a parent and you put your child on the table, right? You still have the ability and the know-all to like make sure the child doesn't harm itself, right? And gives it free will to do certain things. But if you are a parent, you know astronomically more than that child knows, right? That child is not thinking about the table. The child is moving forward. So I think that we have free will to some extent, but we don't have, we can't change God's existent will. Like, that's something that is going to continue moving forward. And God does exist outside time and inside of time, but the same thought process is my brain's always viewed it as imagine if you pulled out a VHS tape, right? And you pulled out the whole piece, you could look at picture by picture by picture and see the entire movie, but you can still interact with it. And I think that's how God interacts with it. But to try to explain that to us is the same as trying to explain to the child how a cell phone works. It's just not going to work. Like, there's just no way. Our brains would just explode.
Any other questions? No one wants to ask one final question. Oh, we got one final question. Here we go. We've got some context in Genesis 1 that tells us. We don't know exactly where, but we know it was the convergence of 4 rivers. Nope, that's the introduction to the Bible, not Genesis 1, which is also the introduction to the Bible. The one is the Tigris, the Euphrates, sorry, I'm scanning very quickly. The Gihon, the Cush, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. So it was a convergence of 4 rivers. So somewhere in the Middle East is where they were. Where exactly? Don't know exactly, but somewhere in that fertile crescent, as they call it in 9th and 10th grade history class. Fantastic. All right, can we thank our panelists up here for answering these questions tonight? That was wonderful. And thank you for your questions. Really enjoy it. I love doing these sorts of things because it helps just kind of know, what do you guys want to know, and that's helpful. I've got a couple of announcements really quick before I let you go. One is massive, very important. You do not, please pay attention. There is no Movi next week. Because of spring break, there is no Movi next week. So enjoy your spring break, but don't come to the Apex because no one will be here, and you'll be very, very sad. And you'll be stuck outside, and that will be very sad. So no Movi next week. The other one is a save the date. I have to turn around so I get all this information right. Save the date, July 16th through the 19th. We are going to be serving at 8 Days of Hope, but we are going to be staying overnight with 8 Days of Hope. So we're going to be serving all of those days, but also staying on site with 8 Days of Hope. So it is like a mission trip in our own backyard. We won't be traveling back and forth, staying right with them. It'll be really awesome. So save the date. It's going to be $10. Registration is coming soon. You won't want to miss it. It's going to be a great opportunity to serve our neighbors in Buffalo together as a ministry across all of the campuses. So really excited for that. More information to come. That, I think, is the only other announcement I've got. So you guys are free to go have a wonderful rest of your night. Oh, and leaders, do not forget leader meeting tonight in classroom 3.